welcome back to another Good For You tip of the week. So, are you aware of how much sodium, also known as salt, that you consume per day? If not, then today is a great day to start, and that's because sodium has a direct effect on our body. In this video, I'm going to share with you what those effects are, so let's jump right in. So number one is dehydration. So if you are careless with the amount of water that you're drinking, then salt has all the more reason to cause dehydration. You either have to increase the amount of water that you're consuming or drastically cut back on the salt. And that's because too much salt in the diet can directly affect the sodium to water ratio in the system. This will make you feel thirsty in order to consume more water. So feeling thirsty is actually a very common sign of dehydration. And since sodium can cause dehydration, this will leave you in a pro-inflammatory state. If you don't rectify the situation, there is a condition called hypernatremia that can occur. What that is, it's the medical term that means too much sodium in the bloodstream. Now the problem is this can occur if we have water restrictions or we're losing too much fluid. Loss of bodily fluid through urine will leave us with too much salt in the blood. Now, people that have diabetes, high sugar levels, and kidney disease are more prone to hypernatremia. Hypernatremia can also lead to neurological dysfunction such as seizures, irritability, and confusion. So, number two, bloating and swelling. So have you ever noticed the day after you binge eat on high salty processed foods that you can't get your ring off? Well, that's because now all of that salt that's in your body, water is going to be retained in order to balance that salt and water balance. So you're feeling puffy and bloated. As your body is retaining more water, this can also lead to gas formation in the gut, leaving you bloated and feeling uncomfortable. Now, the salt in our body is regulated by the kidneys, and the kidneys do an excellent job in order to regulate the sodium, potassium, and calcium in our body. The problem is when there's too much sodium in the body, then it's overwhelmed, the kidneys are overwhelmed, and it's retained as sodium chloride. Now, in order to deal with excess sodium chloride, the body's going to retain more water, and when this happens, there's a potential for some of this fluid to actually leak out into the intestinal tissue spaces, leading to edema. Edema is swelling due to the accumulation of fluid in the hands, the feet, and the ankles. Number three, a lot of people are familiar with kidney stones. The most common advice we give to people that are suffering from kidney stones is drink more water. And that's because water can actually help flush out the kidney stones, but better yet, it can help prevent kidney stones from forming. Kidneys are our natural filters, and they do a great job except when they're overwhelmed. In order to filter out the toxins and waste from our body, what they do is pull the fluids from the blood and put it into the collecting ducts. They have to maintain a proper balance between your sodium and potassium. When there's too much salt in the system, then these minerals are off balance and they're going to retain water instead of flush water. So chronic kidney disease and cardiovascular disease are two diseases that have major risks in common, and that is high blood pressure. It's observed that people that have chronic kidney disease, also known as CKD, are sensitive to salt, and that's because they have the inability to get rid of the excess salt, therefore retaining excess water, increasing their blood pressure. The problem with this is then the small vessels of the kidneys can get damaged, which can potentially lead to kidney damage. High sodium intake can also cause proteinuria. This means that there's excess amounts of protein that is being excreted with the urine. We never want proteins to leave our body. That's not a good sign. That means instead of the proteins being utilized to form muscle and other tissue that we need, it's being dumped. Another major risk of excess salt is the increased amount of urinary calcium. So urinary calcium is the major component of kidney stones. So with excess salt in the system, it can increase your chances of kidney stones. Number four is high blood pressure. Okay, so what's the connection? It lies in our kidneys. Our kidneys are responsible for getting rid of excess salt, the salt and water balance, getting rid of extra water. But when there's too much salt, it's going to retain the water instead of getting rid of it in the form of urine. Too much water in the system is going to increase and elevate the blood pressure, and that can be really dangerous. So people respond to salt differently. Salt-sensitive people can actually change their diet and get on a low-sodium diet, and they're going to see a drastic change in their blood pressure, where salt-resistant people won't see such a major change if they change their diet. High blood pressure is responsible for 2/3 of all strokes that are caused in the USA and 1/2 of all cardiovascular disease that occur in the USA. So it's the primary cause of heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Number 5 is the risk of stomach cancer. All right, so this stomach cancer is the 5th most common cancer known, and research has shown that processed foods, fish, and preserved foods that are high in sodium actually increase your chances of stomach cancer. So in order to decrease your chance, avoid snacking or binging on salty foods. Another reason why salt is very dangerous because it stimulates the growth of this bacteria called Helicobacter pylori. This bacteria is actually linked to ulcers, lesions, and inflammation of the gut, and it's also been linked to certain stomach cancers. So remember, keep track of your salt, and moderation is key. Number 5 is cognitive dysfunction. Okay, so constantly snacking on salty foods is a cause of why we often feel brain fog. Too much sodium causes a destabilization in the protein. Now, excess salt intake has been linked to poor cerebral vascular function, and this is because it stimulates a molecule in the brain to stop producing nitric oxide. When there's low levels of nitric oxide, this allows for an abnormal level of this protein called tau. Now, tau protein is a group of proteins that are found in the brain, and they're responsible for a lot of the functional processes that occur, like axonal transport. Destabilization of the tau protein causes it to actually detach from its original protein. Now the problem is it should never detach because now it roams freely within the brain. It can collect in a certain area of the brain, and this can lead to difficulty in remembering things and concentration. Number 7, salty foods can become an addiction, just like its sugar counterpart. So, research has shown that salt also stimulates the same reward center in the brain as do drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes. That's why when you consume salty foods, you get this pleasurable reward feeling. So, what's the recommended amount of salt you should consume per day? No more than 5 grams, and that's quite a lot. So if you make some key dietary changes, like consuming more fresh fruits and vegetables that are high in potassium and low in sodium, and avoiding breads, cheese, processed foods, and preserved foods high in sodium and low in potassium, can really make a difference in the amount of salt and your blood pressure. And it can keep you from getting any of those cardiovascular diseases or cancer or any other conditions I spoke about before. I hope this video was helpful. Hit the like button and share it with your friends. And thanks for tuning in to another Good For You Tip of the Week. I'll see you next week, and make it a great day.